Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Monday. Hope you've had a great day. Big day in the case. The state rested. Seth Kenney was on the stand. We're going to get to all that. If you're on YouTube, you know the drill. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell if you want notifications. Whenever I post new content, just click on that little bell icon. Music fact of the day, the song Believe by Cher was the first pop song to deliberately distort a singer's vocals. She was also the oldest female solo artist to top the Billboard Top 100 charts here in the USA, thanks to this song. Okay, first off, if I start randomly drooling, it's because my daughters like this lip gloss that is plumping. I went and grabbed a new one. They got this new pack that I bought them, and I slapped that thing on, and I'm gonna tell you guys, my lips are on fire. I normally don't use it, but this is the second time recently I've done this, and I just feel like there's been 1,000 bees attack my lips. The first witness on the stand today was Karen Amq. She is a stills photographer. They document scenes, do behind the scenes stuff. She took around 9,000 photos on the Rust set. The photo you're looking at here was taken on October 15th. It's that gun belt with dummies and also the one with the silver primer. On Cross, they point out this was budgeted for 5 days for her to be on set. She actually took photos of guns pointed directly at the camera. They told her to get as many of those shots as possible. Guns have to be checked by armorers before this is done. She said Hannah was nearby. It appeared Baldwin was the boss, and she never heard anyone tell him no. She's asked if it appeared the budget was a major concern to Gabrielle Pickle. She testified last week in that leather coat, shot Hannah a look on her way out. She said that's their job. She has to come in according to what the budget was. They also asked if she felt like Gabrielle was trying to cheap everyone down. And she said, that's just what they do on a low budget. She said, I made a deal with her and that's it. She was inside the church when the shooting happened. She didn't see Hannah inside, but did see her outside. She said before she took those photos of the gun being pointed right at the camera, she did ask Hannah to check everything. And when she was in the church, she went in to take photos. And at one point, Alec pointed her to get out of his personal space. Next, they recall Marissa Popple. She's the crime scene tech who took photos. This was a good lead up to Seth Kenney's testimony. She's the one that took the photos, which looked like an episode of Hoarders as opposed to a gun and ammo warehouse. They show some photos of the dummy rounds from a box that was found in the prop truck. We've seen all the photos that they go over in this testimony, and I apologize. I didn't do a lot of graphics for this. I've got some things to do after I'm done, so I just didn't have time today. I will link today's episode in the description if you guys want to go back and watch that. They show a photo of the box that was inside the law enforcement car. They show photos of dummy rounds that was from a box that was found in the prop truck in the foam insert, and then those same ones laid out. They had blue Sharpie written on the outside, and those would have come from Seth Kenney. They also show a photo of live rounds that were collected from PDQ. One of those has that silver primer, but they were different from the ones found on set. They found 10 total live rounds at PDQ with silver primers. On Cross, obviously, she can't tell what happened in the month after the shooting before they did the search warrant at PDQ warehouse. They didn't seize any of these dummy rounds or send them to the FBI. And the defense points out they didn't get lab confirmation that those were dummies. They show a photo of the live ammo 1883 box that was found at the PDQ warehouse. On redirect, they point out that the search warrant was limited to only look for and take 45 caliber live rounds. None of those were similar to the ones found on the Rust set. The next witness is Rebecca Smith. She does the key craft services on the set of Rust, so she's responsible for all the food, and then she explains that if they happen to need sunscreen, chapstick, she's the one that they go to replenish that. On the night of the shooting, she went to Hannah's hotel room. Hannah did have a couple of people from the crew staying with her just to keep an eye on her, but they had to run somewhere. So they called her to come sit with Hannah while they were gone. This is the person that as she left, Hannah told her to hold something. It was that baggie that looked to be cocaine. The state asked, compared to a packet of sugar, how many of those would you say, as far as the amount in there, would equal to what she gave you? And she said 4 or 5 of those. The witness is a recovering addict, and based on her experience, she thought it to be cocaine. She threw it in the hallway trash can before she even left that floor. She said she was offended and didn't want anything to do with it. She got several texts from Hannah after that asking for her stuff back. She didn't tell law enforcement about the alleged cocaine because she didn't want to get involved. Now, on cross, they asked if Hannah was visibly distraught. She said yes. They asked if she said she would stay with her while the others were gone, and she said yes. They asked if the people had gotten back when she left. She said no. So they said, despite your word, you left. They asked how old she was when she last used cocaine. She said 21. I believe she's in her 50s now. They point out she hasn't seen that substance in over 30 years, and she says, no, I've seen it. I just haven't used it. The defense says, you said it could be cocaine or meth. And she said she doesn't recall saying that. Of course, they bring out the transcript of her pretrial interview where she said it could have been meth too. I'm not sure where they were going with that. Either one, just as bad. But the defense, y'all, I know they got to try, but they were like, it could have been another white powder. Do you know what protein powder looks like? Powdered sugar. I laughed out loud because I'm going to tell you guys, you know how like when you're a teenager, you think your parents are dumb? And so one time when they found a little bag in my room with some green stuff in it, I told them it was oregano, and they just literally laughed in my face and said, girl, we were hippies. We know what's in your bag. So I thought, could it be powdered sugar? Was right on par with that. They asked if she was walking past police officers, and she said they could have been armed security. She didn't see a badge. The defense says in her pretrial interview, they asked why she didn't hand it back to Hannah. And she said she didn't want to do anything in front of the police officer. So there's kind of a back and forth about, was it police? Was it armed security? They point out that when Hannah texted her and asked for her things back, things is plural. So then it goes to redirect. Have you ever seen powder sugar packaged like that? Nope. Have you ever seen cocaine packaged like that? Yup. Hannah didn't act upset about Miss Hutchins' death when she was with her the night of the shooting in her room. The witness said Hannah told her she was worried about her career and possible prosecution. The defense says they want to ask a follow-up question, and they ask if she was the one who told Hannah that Miss Hutchins had died. She said yes. The next witness, Seth Kenney, the one we have heard about since day one. He is a weapons supply company to the entertainment industry. Also, he's a volunteer with active shooter training. He still has the business. He's owned it for about 12 to 13 years. At one point in his career, he met Thel Reed. He knew of him before that. He and Thel became friends in 2018. He says Thel's a gun coach and he works armorer. Said he was fantastic back in the day. And as far as being an armorer, it could be episodic, like The Walking Dead, or it could be for a whole film. He said ultimately for Seth himself, working on set wasn't what he wanted to focus on. They did work on a film where Thel was the armorer and Seth was the supplier. That was 1883. He said he had to push hard to get Thel hired for that job. He said he's tight with the prop master and convinced him to hire Thel and keep him on longer than most gun coaches would be kept on. He said that Thel's pushing 80 and ultimately he had difficulty working in the Texas heat and needed air condition a lot, and sets in Texas just don't allow for that. Thel's been a gun coach and an armorer for 60 years. At some point, it was decided that on the set of 1883, they were going to set up a private range where the cast would learn about the gun's functions with a mix of blanks and lives. The different kinds of ammo were kept in separate areas, and among the ammo they used that was live was the 45 Colt rounds. The live 45 ammo came from Thel. He had 325 reloads because at the time it was difficult to source live ammunition. Back at the time, if you remember during COVID, it was really hard to get ammo and what was out there was super expensive. He goes through essentially what ammunition is. It's the brass, the primer, the gunpowder, and the projectile. Those four components make up a single round of ammo. They'll got the reloads from Joe Swanson. That's the JS on those boxes we've heard so much about. He is the primary supplier of blanks and dummies worldwide. Seth sources 100% of his dummies from Joe Swanson. And he said, if you see a puff of smoke in a movie or a TV show, chances are Joe Swanson made that. The ammo wasn't all used up when they were finished at 1883. He said they had about 125 rounds left. He said it's a little hazy to think about. It becomes really hazy on cross, y'all. But after training on set, he remembers that those remaining rounds were offloaded from his van. It got moved back to Albuquerque in a gray bin marked live ammo on both sides at the PDQ warehouse. He said it's better to keep that near blanks because dummies and live ammunition can look the same and they should never be kept next to each other. He and Thel supplied the blanks and dummies to The Old Way. That's the movie Hannah was working on, and that was her first head armorer job. At that time, they were prepping for 1883 when they supplied that to her. Seth supplied half the guns to The Old Way. long arms, lever action, shotguns. 50% of the blanks were from Thel. Seth supplied 13 of the 3840 dummies. That was all he had at the time. Hannah and Thel supplied the rest. They show a box of 45 long Colt dummies and asked if he had a box from Joe Swanson like that. He said no. 1883 was the first show where he needed those 45 long Colt dummies. But when he did need them, he needed them by the thousands. Joe Swanson asked if he wanted him to package those up. Seth said there's no point, so they were sent to him in bulk. The dummies for Rust, he gave 45 Colt rounds in a box of 50 on October 12th. Those came off the prop truck in Texas from the 1883 training session. Seth and Hannah had issues with a couple of guns that potentially needed replacements, so he pulled from the 1883 inventory from the prop truck, but couldn't find a 45 long Colt chamber gun that matched what they had on Rust. He found one from a 4440 dummy round, and then he spotted some antiqued 45 long Colt dummies in bulk. He double bagged those in grocery store bags, and he drove those from that 1883 training session back to PDQ warehouse in Albuquerque. That was a mouthful, y'all. Due to the fact that he was driving in that van with a lot of firearms, they're worth a lot of money, he slept in the van. Ultimately, they were brought into PDQ on the 12th. He got rid of the grocery bags they were in and put the rounds in boxes. He reassembled and tested the gun, and Sarah was running 3 hours late to come get that stuff. So while waiting on her, Seth looked at the antiqued rounds and realized they just didn't look right for the camera. So he put some chemicals on there, and that made some of the rattles seem muddy. He said Swanson stopped putting BBs into the dummy rounds because you could actually hear those on camera. He points out he can watch movies or TV shows and hear the dummies rattling. Instead, Swanson started using a piece of lead shot. It's a bit muffled, and the chemicals Seth used caused a gooey layer. They just didn't sound safe to him. He took an hour to rattle, then to polish, and then re-rattle those rounds to be sure they made that audible sound before he boxed those up. They show a photo of ammunition in a brown box. There's a Brillo pad in there. It's the box with the dummies that he was polishing with steel wool. There were some spent shell casings in there. He wrote in blue Sharpie the contents of the box, and the remainder was left in that brown cardboard box that he didn't send. They show a photo of the foam insert that the rounds were given to Sarah on October 12th. They show a photo of one round that's a little bit different. It's up there on the top if you're watching on YouTube. It's a little shinier than the others. It just doesn't have that aged look. He doesn't think he would have provided that round, and he doesn't know what Hannah did with the box once it left the warehouse. They show photos of dummies in the belt, and then they show after they've been taken out. He said those look like his rounds. He can't guarantee it. It's difficult to say. But casually, yes. In a court of law, not so much. They show another photo of the belt ammunition with that extra round. They talk about a Denix round. It's a costume round. What's the difference between a costume and a dummy round? A costume round doesn't rattle. They won't chamber in a gun. And the cast manufacturer's seam is out of spec. He doesn't keep those in stock. He thinks it sets a dangerous precedent to say the dummies don't rattle. He never gave a costume round on the set of Rust. He knows Billy Ray. They met briefly. He owns a similar company as PDQ, and he's also a set designer. Seth reached out to Billy Ray to supply dummies to the Rust set to see if he had any of those 45 Colt rounds. He didn't have any, but he did have 98 4440s, and those would work in the gun belt. You wouldn't be able to tell from 3 feet away. Hannah was the third person to provide 45 long Colt rounds to the Rust set. Those were leftovers from the old way that she got from her dad. They bring up a text conversation between Seth and Hannah. The date on that is October 5th. He's asking how she's looking as far as gun belts and bandoliers. He says gun belts can hold up to 18 rounds of dummies. Hannah says she can't find any of the dummies. Seth asks what happens to the one from the old way. Hannah said some are still in the belts. Seth explains she needs to let him know as a normal course of business moving forward that if something gets lost or stolen on set, they need to pay for it. Hannah says that he never mentioned it and said that she's lost some in the action scenes, maybe 50 total, and asked if she needs to round those up tomorrow and count them. Then Hannah says, you both send me out to do these things and don't teach me. Shame on both of you. I believe her dad may be in on this text thread. They didn't specify, or if they did, I didn't catch it. Seth responds, you're a naughty child. I'll let Papa handle this. Hannah says, so what if I need more? You guys suck, or something to that effect. His impression was that Hannah was bringing dummies already loaded into gun belts from the old way set. And he said, we depended on that because everything from PDQ was slated for the 1883 project. The only way to get the ammo for Rust immediately was to reach out to other suppliers. The first time he was on set was the date of the search warrant on that prop truck. He was there to give them the code for the safe that the guns were kept in. He didn't need to be there, but he felt he should be there to answer questions that might come up. He provided 30 firearms to the Rust set that were stored on that prop truck in the safe. He also provided Baldwin's gun that he used in the movie. He got it from the manufacturer, Pieta. He bought that specifically for Rust, and it was brand new, as was 11 of the 12 revolvers that he rented out to Rust. On October 21st, he found out about the shooting through Sarah. He missed a call. She texted back and said emergency. Within a few minutes, he returned her call. After talking to her, he called Thel Reed. He tried to get him several times, texted as well. Finally, Thel returned that call. He said that he and Hannah had a disagreement on October 16th about that accidental discharge. He said Hannah was emotional. She sent a text to him, cussing him out, essentially. He felt she needed some space, and he thought maybe he was due an apology, and he just wanted to give it time. He's seen photos of the live ammo, and he said he didn't own any that looked like that. After the 21st, he found out he was essentially being blamed for the live ammo. He started to sense it, and he said knowing Thel, he understood how much he loved his daughter. In January of 2022, Seth was sued. The lawsuit was later dismissed. On cross, y'all. It was a very effective cross by the defense. I mean, this is where having a good defense attorney comes in. On the 1883 training days, Thel Reed brought live rounds in a green ammo can. They were reloads. Some of those were that Starline brass brand. There were 3 characteristics in the reloads. Thel brought 45 Colt rounds that were made up of almost equal thirds of these different types. A third of those were the semi-wide cutters. Essentially, the tip of that looks like a crayon you take fresh out of the box. The second one, kind of a cone shaped, he said it looks like a spaceship. And the third, the most common and typical, is the heavy grain bullet. It's circular on top. He's asked if he retained the ammo can and the live rounds Thel brought to 1883, and he said no. He retained the reloads from Thel, but when he first saw the contents, it was on the firing range in Texas. When Seth opened that ammo box, it was a jumbled mess. So he got 10 brand new boxes and took the contents of Thel's ammo box and put those rounds in different boxes. The can was being used at that point for the spent brass. He did retain live rounds, which were photographed by crime scene after the shooting. The defense says he doesn't know if they were returned before October 21st, but they point out you came back and met with Sarah on October 12th. You gave her 45 long Colt dummies from the set of 1883. He said he's never been able to identify the exact date those live rounds got back to Albuquerque. And the defense says you said on direct you drove them back from 1883 and you can't remember the date. Seth said he could ballpark it to a month or two because he said he made 2 trips back and forth from Texas to New Mexico and then to California at some point. They asked if he sat down and looked at a calendar or looked at trip receipts to try and figure out those dates, and he said yes. They point out this guy stored some of these in the bathroom. He stores live ammo for self-defense also, and the only other live ammo in the house was what was left from the 1883 training. Look, y'all, they show pictures of all this clutter around his warehouse. They show shelves full of boxes with blanks. As far as inventory, he made a list of what he had. It was very casual. He said if Joe Swanson reached out and said he's making this kind of ammo, he would look at the list he made to see if it was something he needed, but there was no official inventory. They hand him an invoice to Rust from his company. The invoices are for blanks and dummies. One was for guns, replicas, gun socks, and rubber guns. There's also a question about a comment he made to Corporal Hancock, who was the lead detective on the case, about him supplying primed cases to Sarah on the set of Rust. He said he would be interested to see what color primers they have. He doesn't remember this conversation, so they hand him the transcript. He says the transcript says prime cases, and he wouldn't have said that, but he doesn't remember the conversation. The defense asked about a discussion about those being there, and he looked for a photo to show Hancock. He doesn't remember that. He's asked, did you say chances are they'll all have the same color primer? He said he doesn't remember that conversation. He said if Sarah had primed cases on Rust, they would have the invoice. He said it's consumable and he wouldn't be surprised if they got primed blanks. He called Troy Teskey and Joe Swanson from the sheriff's office when he was being interviewed. They asked Joe how many rounds he made in total. He said 700. When Seth asks Swanson if they're in that green ammo can, he starts cussing. Seth starts cursing in the police department interview. He says, crap, crap, crap. Oh God, I'm still trying. Crap, crap, crap. Well, she didn't do her effing job. The defense says, whatever you found out on the phone, you cursed. Why? He said he was worried some of those rounds Thel gave to Troy and had been using to shoot live rounds somehow migrated into Thel's leathers or through Hannah. And we would be here, meaning in court, saying that Joe Swanson provided live ammo. And 99.9% of the time, Swanson provides shows with blanks and dummies, and that's an uncomfortable situation. The defense says, but you blamed Hannah. He says, no, I'm just telling you my thought process at the time, trying to figure out where the live ammo came from. And would it come back on Swanson? In July of last year, he had a meeting with the defense. When asked why you said the curse words, you said you didn't know why you said that. He says maybe something helped him recollect. It was a stressful situation. The live rounds on the set were the Starline brass with the nickel primers. Hannah shipped everything from Montana back to him in Texas when she was finished with her production. The defense points out he called Detective Hancock over 40 times, and Seth said more than that, probably. She showed him some photos when they did the search warrant on the prop truck as well. He did not know they were coming to search his business. He said he offered his DNA to Detective Hancock. They did not take him up on that. Because he has his firearm license where he can deal this stuff, his fingerprints are in the system. They didn't take his prints related to this case. They asked if he wanted Hannah fired. He said he didn't want to fire Hannah. He said she was doing a horrible job at props and that was an issue. Ultimately, he said he had mixed feelings. He reached out to mutual friends he had with Thel. And they point out in an interview, he said Hannah was being an idiot. Then he said he wanted Sarah to get rid of her. In a July interview, he said he wasn't going to work with Hannah again in the future. He said there were mixed emotions, and if he really wanted her fired, he could have gotten her fired. So the defense asked, well, who was your contact on set? He names off some people, including that line producer, Gabrielle Pickle. Sarah was willing to work with Hannah just to get the movie finished. The defense points out in July of last year, he told the defense that he did in California. He said if he does, he hasn't seen it in years, and PDQ doesn't, and they don't make their own reloads. They ask if he knows how to convert a dummy round into a live round, and he says hypothetically. The defense says, well, hypothetically, you told Detective Hancock if camera crew wanted to send a little going away present. He goes on to describe the process of how you make a reload. He doesn't remember this, so the defense gives him the transcript. And he remembers now. He explains how you do it. It confused me hearing it, so trying to explain it to you would just be a hot mess. He just said he didn't. We'll leave it there. For the prop cart search, he had the code to the safe from Sarah. She texted that to him. He said he trained her before she worked on Rust, like the basics of using blanks and dummies, and then blanks adapted guns. The defense says, did you train her to throw away dummy rounds? And he says no. At this point, they show the chaos that is his warehouse. I think a lot of this was just a good way to show the jury that the condition of this place facilitated the possibility that maybe a live round slipped out and got into what he provided to Rust. They show a box from a top shelf there. The font is similar as the one from the cop car on the set of Rust after the shooting. It's a Joe Swanson box with that JS on there. Some of the boxes he has have JS, some don't. If they do have it, it comes from Mr. Swanson. They show the boxes just piled outside waiting to be thrown out. And in that pile is one of the boxes of the shipment from Pieta, which was Baldwin's gun before Rust started production. The defense says that would have been October. These photos were taken in late November. There's empty gun cases, cases with guns in them. There's locked cabinets inside, firearms, inbound and outbound stuff. He even had rounds in the bathroom, y'all. He said it was due to just short hops back home and then back to Texas. He just unloaded stuff and left. They show a box of 45 long Colt that he populated with Thel's live ammo from 1883. They are not marked as live. There's loose lives around that box, and then there's Thel's empty ammo box from 1883. They go back to that box of dummies they showed earlier with the Brillo pad in there. They point out there's 2 spent blanks in there, so not all are dummies, like he said. That wasn't seized during the search warrant, by the way. And they just show photo after photo of the mess. He told Sarah to put a piece of tape over the safe so nobody would go in before law enforcement. He said the disagreement that Hannah and Sarah had over that discharge, he told Hannah that Sarah was her boss and she better back off. Sarah had already self-reported that discharge to production. He told Hannah she just needed to move on. What's funny is at this point, the defense attorney's talking and he says Sarah and Siri popped up. So my daughter's name is Sarah, and this happens all the time. I felt him on that. On redirect, to me personally, I think the state seemed flustered and at times almost treated him like a witness on cross because cross-exam was not good for the state at all. The 45 longs were reloads. None of the lives from PDQ had the same shape as the live ones they found on the Rust set. Of the live rounds from 1883, there were 3 different projectile types. Did all 3 of those types come back to PDQ? He doesn't know. Once they finished 1883, he said he didn't go back into the boxes and did not take inventory when they were finished. The state asked if all the live ammo from 1883 at PDQ was in that gray bin. He says yes. He said the self-defense live rounds were elsewhere in the warehouse, but they were not 45 long Colt rounds. They were 357, 38 specials, and 300 blackout rounds. PDQ owns hundreds of firearms. Some of those are kept in Arizona. As far as the primed cases, they go back to explain this. A primed case has no additional charge of gunpowder to make a bang or a puff of smoke. It's like a loud clap gun. You can add talcum powder, which adds a little puff, but an empty casing with a live primer, but there's just no gunpowder, no projectile. They ask, can it kill someone? And he gets this wrong here, but he starts to say that this happened with Brandon Lee. And the initiation of the primer was enough to put the projectile into the barrel. They call that a squib load. The prop crew emptied what they thought were dummy rounds and the live primer. So the state at this point interrupts and says, for a primed case to hurt someone like with Brandon Lee, there has to be a projectile. And in that situation, there was a projectile lodged in the gun. But she goes back to correct him to talk about the primed cases. Those are shells with just the primer. Can they kill somebody? He said, doubtful. It can injure. He says that during the search warrant, they did take out all of the live 45s from the warehouse. Starline Brass is one of the primary sources of casings for Joe Swanson, but he also learns the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office uses that as their ammo. Package from Hannah from the Old Way set. Those leather belts, they weren't inventoried. They asked if he noticed dummy rounds. He did not inventory them because he said they were not his property. When he got that from Hannah, it didn't include firearms with the leathers. There was a replica gun in there. There were 2 hard cases that had other firearms, but not in that same box. Some of the firearms were his, some were Thell's, some of them were loaded with dummy rounds when they came. All the dummies rattled that he provided to the Rust set. The reason he called Detective Hancock so many times was to help. If he found something he thought they needed to see or things like that, he would give her a call. The prosecutor asked why he didn't want to work with Hannah in the future. And he goes on to explain that she loaded a full load blank with animals on set. This was just days prior to the shooting. Sarah called him to express her concern about this. He said the issue of loading a full blank with a horse in the vicinity, he said it's a huge violation of the armorer's work. The idea is they want to use the least amount of noise and gunpowder for the effect needed. The one you'd use with horses and kids is no greater than a quarter load. You can even use 1/8. He said a full load blank can be considered animal cruelty. And then there's an approach. When she gets back, they just move on. She said, would it be easier to turn a live round into a dummy? He said, yes, it's not the ideal situation. And she's like, I'm not asking what's ideal. I'm asking what's easier. He said it's less complicated. If one tried to turn live into dummies, they would need special equipment. One of those being a Birchner puller. We talked about that. It kind of looks like what I plug flat tires with on my car. It's just kind of like a T-shape with the top of it being thicker so you can hold it. Did you train Sarah specifically on how to handle a single action Army revolver? He said no. He also said he's never had a box of 45 long Colts that look like the box on the set of Rust from that cop car. They go through photo after photo from his warehouse. Does this look like the box that was in the car? No, each time. He provided replica guns for Rust, no long guns. The defense follow-up, they talk about turning a live round into a dummy. What equipment would you need? He said you would need something to press out the primer and a way to measure and dispense gunpowder, something to load the primer into the case. They mentioned that he didn't train Sarah with the single action revolver and she was under your license. Was she not permitted to use that? He said, actually, she was. the defense says, even without training. And he says he doesn't remember training her to check for safe on a single action army. The thinking was Hannah is the armorer and she'll take care of it. The defense asked if he certified her. He said there is no certification, but she was on his paperwork. They bring back Corporal Hancock really quickly. A witness last week demonstrated the single action army after he rebuilt it. They asked if she attempted to view the barrel of the gun without removing the cylinder. She said yes. She wasn't fully successful. She tried to do a barrel check today for debris by not removing the cylinder. So she took the hammer to a half cock, which allows that cylinder to spin freely. She looked down the barrel and she could see a little bit of light, but you can't see an unobstructed view. She then pulled the hammer back all the way to see where the firing pin would go in that cylinder. She looked again, could not see the entirety of the barrel, but couldn't see enough to say the barrel was completely empty. She said uncomfortably, she took the revolver and in a fully cocked position, she looked in the barrel and used a light source to see with the barrel pointed at her face, y'all. You have to move in different directions to see, and she wouldn't say the barrel would 100% be free from debris by doing what she did. They talk about someone named Brian Norvell being interviewed in this case. The defense was present for that. This is the body cam video. He is the person that reaches over that crime scene tape to pick something up off the prop cart. The interview was 1 hour and 45 minutes, and the state points out the defense asked him no questions that day. Mr. Bowles asked Seth why he called 40 times. Prosecution said, how many times did Mr. Bowles call? She said quite a bit, plus emails and texts, and they asked around 40 times, and she said, oh yeah. The prosecution said, how many times have I called you? She said 5 or 10. On cross, defense points out, I'm representing Hannah, and I called and emailed in that capacity. Seth is a potential suspect in this case. She says, according to, and she said he was investigated. The defense asked, do you normally talk to potential suspects that long in a case? She says there's no limit on how long you can talk to somebody who's a potential suspect. The defense points out she is not an expert in inspecting firearms, and she didn't have tools. So they say, was it more of a casual attempt? She said, I tried to replicate how they said the barrel checks were done. They asked if she did it outside. She said inside. The defense points out that the light outside is different. That's how they did it on the set. The next witness was Mike Primo. I'm not going to go into this really deep. You guys can go look for yourselves. I've got an example here on YouTube. He works for Primo Forensics. He does analysis of digital multimedia evidence, audio, photo, video that is used in criminal litigation. They took several sources of images and video from different devices. He was asked to enhance those photos. The one they really focused on was a photo of Baldwin's gun belt. And if you're on YouTube, you can see here the before and after the enhancement. You really can see that silver primer of what was eventually tested and found to be a live round. That image was taken on October 10th of 2021. So before Seth would have provided those 45 long Colt rounds to the set. They also show a photo of the prop cart. There's an enhanced picture of the box on top, but it was not enhanced, y'all. It was blurry. I didn't see any improvements to it. I mean, it's cool what the guy does, but like that one photo, I didn't see the point. The state rested. So that's it. Tomorrow, the defense will start their case. Curious, does Hannah take the stand? It wasn't the best day for the prosecution. I don't know how much it's going to matter in the long run, because really, is somebody just going to dig their heels in and say this problem was much bigger than Hannah? It wasn't just her. Really, from the date of the hiring, it seems like it was a cluster. Or is it going to be where the buck stops with her? Her job was to maintain safety on the set. She didn't. One is dead, one injured. A lot of people traumatized. So let's see tomorrow what the state's going to put up. I do believe they have some experts coming in to testify. I think we could be at closings by the end of the week. But that's it for today. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We'll see you tomorrow.